I'd like to call the City Council to order, please, for Wednesday, April the 12th.
This is case number Z 2023-05. WC Acquisitions, LLC is requesting the rezoning of 4.78 acres located at 1122 Powers Ferry Road from CRC, Community Retail Commercial, to MXD, Mixed Use Development.
We have the privilege of having someone from the Powers Ferry Corridor Alliance. We've worked heavily with the local community on this plan.
My name is Patty Rice, and I am the current president of the Powers Ferry Corridor Alliance. A key part of our work is to provide a forum for informed dialogue on and recommendations for quality growth and revitalization in the area that we serve. The application before you tonight deals with a site that is close to what we think of as the PFCA's epicenter, and that is why I am here. I'll be brief and say that in summary, the PFCA concluded to support this application. The proposed and timely redevelopment of this site has the potential to set a very high bar for and to positively influence the quality of future redevelopment in the adjacent areas, including Delk Road to the west. Your approval will support this. Denying this application has the potential to leave the community with a site that is essentially not a redeemable retail location, and that should it remain abandoned or considered a blight for too long after Kroger does leave, it will also influence the adjacent areas, but in a complete opposite way, and be detrimental to the surrounding community.
Subject property and proposed development is situated on approximately 4.8 acres located at the city limits between Marietta and unincorporated Cobb County, just on the east side of I-75 at the intersection of Powers Ferry and Delk Road. The subject property sits on an existing mixed-use node that contains a mixture of commercial, retail uses, office, a diversity of housing uses, and is very proximate to the 90,000 plus jobs in the area. And the proposed development is consistent with the future land use plan of Community Activity Center. It's currently occupied by Kroger, as was stated, but the Kroger is vacating later this year to a new facility that's under construction just a few hundred feet south of this site. You know, again, if it were to be repurposed as something other than the proposed development, it's most likely that that would become undesirable use, we'll say. The subject property does have true, real walkable or walkability within the existing mixed-use environment, so that makes the proposal here really ideal for the neighborhood, meaning that the combination of multifamily, retail, commercial, creating a streetscape makes that walkable environment more appealing. As I said, it's going to be directly across the street from a Publix and walkable to a new Kroger as well, in addition to just walkability to the existing surrounding uses of retail, office, and commercial.
Glad that you've been able to work with the community and to bring this on board. Glad that it's a true mixed-use building with the retail on the bottom, the other residential component on the back and on the top. Seems like it might be a good idea for the area. So my motion is to approve the rezoning from CRC to MXD with the variance to reduce minimum tract size from MXD from 5 acres to 4.7841 acres, and with the letter of stipulations that was dated March 8th, 2023.
Please indicate your vote.
I'll make a motion to override a veto.
Second.
Any discussion on the override? Please indicate your vote. The override fails. The motion is declined. Next item is the moratorium for apartment multifamily. Do you have the suggested amendment to this?
Yes, sir. I'll open the public hearing with your permission.
Oh, this is a public hearing.
Yes, sir.
I recognize Mr. Haney.
Thank you, Mayor Tumlin. This will be a public hearing on the issue related to a moratorium for apartments and multifamily. I'll ask Mr. Roth to come forward. As he comes forward, there has been a revised motion to this. The change in the revised motion from the printed motion is that this will be a temporary emergency 6-month moratorium. It also clarifies that it will have no effect on a previously filed proper application. This will be, if it is approved, it will be going forward only. And the legal research shows that a temporary moratorium is valid in Georgia if it is both temporary and for a specific reason. And I'll ask Mr. Roth to start out, and then we'll ask if there's any public comment. Mr. Roth?
Thank you, Mr. Haney. This proposed moratorium for apartments and multifamily would be a temporary moratorium, which would allow staff to study the existing zoning regulations and develop a plan to move forward that City Council could consider, where they would be able to determine whether there needs to be changes to our existing ordinances or other facets of the zoning ordinance itself.
This is a public hearing. If there is anyone here tonight that would like to speak on this matter, please come forward at this time. Yes, sir. There's a limit of 5 minutes per speaker.
As I said during the town hall moratorium, when this came up last time, I generally don't think moratoriums are usually the best idea. So that's just my opinion on that. I don't think a moratorium is the best way to handle the situation on that. Thank you.
Made it clear that I'm not for apartments in every part of the city, and it isn't about the kind of people who might live in an apartment. When I first moved out from college, my very first place was an apartment. Actually, there were several. It really is, where do apartments make sense? Are we grouping all apartments together, which I think was the fallacy of Franklin Gateway? It just became apartment row. Or are we putting apartments in areas where there's some single-family homes, there's maybe some townhomes, and we are making neighborhoods? So I think that the moratorium gives us an opportunity to step back and look at our zoning categories and look at where it makes sense for apartments to go. Again, it's not about the apartment. It's not about the people who might live in the apartment. It truly is, I don't think every neighborhood, every street, every area makes sense for an apartment. And I think we need to look at that.
Thank you. The motion is second before us. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please indicate your vote. Motion carries 6-1.
Donald Barth, Marietta. I guess y'all know I'm a little disappointed in that kind of thought pattern. Multifamily is not a sin, I promise you. People in the real world have to get an apartment when a big corporation transfers them to a town. They have to have somewhere to stay. They have to get their feet wet. They live there for a while before they start purchasing. This thing about a stigma, man, where did that come from? That comes from rich people that just want to say, my family had me a house waiting for me. Most of us don't. We work our way up. It is so bad to think that I can pick the ones up here with a silver spoon. I can pick the ones up here that didn't have to work the way up the ladder, whether it's corporate ladder or coming up, picking up trash. I don't care. Apartments do not have to be a stigma. Apartments are for people. Professionals live in apartments. Back in the old days, there was an apartment built down there in Atlanta. And, that's where everybody wanted to go, to the Darlington. Later on, we had apartments out here in Marietta. We had apartments down on the River Bend, and we had Moonraker over there. Sometimes apartments are fun. It's where the action is. Apartments don't have to be the stigma that you remember because the ball got dropped on Franklin Road. So please take into consideration, normal people live in apartments. It's just a fact of life. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr.?
I was here, I think, exactly a year ago when you guys were looking at a townhouse moratorium. Fortunately, that did not pass, and I'm here again tonight in support of what Mr. Barth is saying, that we need to think a little bit differently, I would say, in this city. Apartments inherently are not bad. Apartments are actually really good redevelopment tools. I think we just had a really good redevelopment project walk out the door, potentially leaving us with another hole in the city like we have with Harry's right now. So I think, to me, as an advocate for various types of housings within our town, housing that supports young professionals or even supports empty nesters. Lots of different people live in apartments, and we need to, I think, move beyond this notion that all apartments are bad, all multifamily is bad. Let's get away from that, please. If you do go forward with this moratorium, I think the thing that I would ask is you take that time and do your homework. Take the 6 months, if that's what it is. Think about what the tax implications are. Think about what the redevelopment potential within the city could be. And then I would also say, I'm a little bit concerned that the underlying idea here is to rezone property and downzone it. And I feel like that's a risk. That's a risk that I think the city should take into account. Are we opening ourselves up to lawsuits? So with that, I just really appreciate your time. Let me know if you got any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Bishop? Thank you, sir.
I was all ready for a moratorium, 6 months ago or 7 months ago, and I came ready, prepared to speak in favor of it, and kind of had the rug pulled out from under me. All of a sudden, it just kind of disappeared there at the end of a city council meeting or something. So I'm for a moratorium, but I don't think it needs to be particularly specific. I think the whole zoning process needs to be reviewed. And I think y'all definitely need a consultant's help in this. That previous zoning I talked about points up one problem. It's the zoning process in Marietta is pretty loosey-goosey. And it seems to me like y'all just invented a new zoning category for that project on Booth Road. And I think it needs to be really tightened up. And I don't think the problem is particularly rental oriented, because I think much of the stuff that you're building now is going to turn into rental pretty quick. And some of it, the multifamily units, they look like rental units or even motels that are being built now. Marietta is kind of where DeKalb County was in the 70s and 80s. We saw them go through a thing where that was the hot place to live if you moved to Atlanta, was in DeKalb County, and it had a lot of amenities. But they quickly ran out of developable space. Marietta's blocked in. It can't really grow much. And we're running out of developable space. And now what y'all are doing are eating into areas that shouldn't be developed. And I think I've mentioned this a while back, that the city's at an inflection point where we can tip over and become a Decatur or East Point if we don't start looking at what's going on in the zoning area. So let's don't make this too specific. Let's look at it before it's too late. I'm afraid you've already let the mule out of the barn, but a moratorium's a good idea, especially if you get some professional help. Thank you.
I'm honestly pretty disappointed seeing the mixed-use development project just have to walk out the door like this. As you know, younger folks, I'm in my 20s, my siblings, friends, are really struggling to find a way to move into the cities that they really want to live into, and apartments are an entryway. I think maligning apartments, making it sound as if renters or the ownership of a rental unit or rental apartments going from one owner to another, I honestly find it astonishing that that kind of language is used here, because it makes it sound as if you're unable to afford a home, you've suddenly done something wrong or you're a blight to the community, and that's just not the case. The gentleman back there expressed some thoughts about how people step up, and yes, an apartment is a way to step up. My parents moved here in the 90s. Ironically, they lived on Buford Highway in an apartment, very tight, very cramped. But it was a way to move up. They weren't a blight to the community. They weren't introducing crime. They weren't doing anything wrong. And I find it embarrassing that the city will reject hardworking folks like my parents, like the community I grew up in, for the impression that these people are doing something wrong because they have to use rentals. I'm honestly pretty frustrated seeing that. The city has expensive housing if you're trying to buy. It also has expensive rental units if you're trying to rent. There should be a way that we can accommodate. And I think this moratorium, it really doesn't address the issue of housing. It addresses the cosmetics, which I promise you is not on most people's minds when they're looking for a home. They're looking for a home, number one, and they're looking for everything around it, number two. And maybe number three comes the cosmetics. So please, I would ask you to not impose this moratorium unless there's a clearly defined reason that it's necessary. There are things that are moving, and housing and development and resources and economic development that's coming to the city that we're about to reject, just like we did right now. And as you all know, the economy is coming to a slowdown. What happens in 6 months, what comes up in 6 months may not be the opportunities we have now. Please don't let this slide. The entire metro area is growing. People are coming in. Do not turn them away, because they will add, they're not subtracting from our city. Thank you.
Any questions of the speaker?